I want you to imagine going through life or your athletic career with all these goals, aspirations, ambitions, only to never actually achieve them due to an underlying fear of failing. That's what happens when you allow the fear of failure to run your life. Hey there, my name's Eli Straw. I'm the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the 4 steps you can take to overcome the fear of failure. The fear of failure is one of those mental game challenges that really impacts so many areas of your performance. When you have the fear of failure, this is going to lead to higher levels of anxiety because the more you're afraid to fail, the more anxious you become. So that means during your performances, during your games, you grow anxious because your mind is fixated on this outcome. The reason the fear of failure impacts you so badly when it comes to your performance is because the fear of failure is rooted in outcome-oriented thinking. Now, the process. Have you heard anybody talk about focus on the process? Be mindful. Mindfulness means you're in this present moment. Whenever you're fearing failure, your mind is not in this present moment. Your mind has drifted into the future. You are worried about the outcome. Now, let me ask you a question. When was the last time that you were able to actually control the outcome of your performance by focusing on the outcome? You may think that you were able to, but in fact, the only power you have in controlling the outcome of your performance is by focusing on the present moment, focusing on the present skills that you're having to do right now, your responsibilities in this present moment. That is what's going to impact the outcome. Yet, the fear of failure causes you to only focus on this outcome. You are so afraid of failing. Your mind then thinks, I have to focus on not failing. By focusing on not failing, you're in fact not focusing on what you need to be focusing on, and your head is wrapped up in this idea of not failing, rather than succeeding. So when you have this fear of failure, yes, you're going to have anxiety because you're growing worried about not failing. Another thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a drop in your confidence. Confidence comes from seeing yourself succeed. Confidence comes from believing you have the skills required to succeed. Yet, when your mind is consumed by focusing on failure, focusing on not wanting to fail, but that's still focusing on failure, you in fact are only seeing yourself as the possibility of failure. You're only seeing yourself in light of failure. So you're going to have lower levels of confidence. Now, if you're struggling with the fear of failure, I really don't think I need to tell you how horrible it is on your performance. But I promise you, focusing on not failing is never going to help you actually not fail. In fact, focusing on not failing is going to do nothing but bring that failure closer to you. If you want to really not fail, you have to learn to focus on 1, succeeding, but then 2, you have to learn to focus on the process. And we'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about the 4 steps you can take. But for right now, let's talk about why you fear failure. Because when we get to these steps that you need to take, understanding why you fear failure is a very important part to the process. Now, when we're thinking about the reasoning behind the fear of failure in an athletic sense, there are 5 reasons that we can point to as to why you're developing this fear. Number 1 is going to be shame. So let's say at the end of a game, you fail. Do you ever feel ashamed? I know that I did. When I was playing baseball, if I had a bad game, I felt so ashamed. I would feel ashamed in front of my parents. I would feel ashamed in front of my peers, in front of the kids that were going to be at class the next day. I would feel ashamed in front of my teammates and coaches because I thought that they were judging me based on my failures, based on my bad performance. Number 2 is that when we fail, we often speak very down to ourselves. Over time, this negative self-talk is going to take a very heavy toll. So the more you fail and you self-deprecate, you tear yourself down. You say, I suck, I'm a failure, I knew I couldn't do it. While those may seem like trivial sayings in the moment. What that's doing is tearing down your confidence, tearing down your self-worth, and over time, you're going to grow fearful of such negative self-talk. So now you develop the fear of failure because you know if you fail, you're going to begin speaking down to yourself. Another one is we often think that success is the most important criteria for parents, teachers, coaches, teammates, friends, and that if we fail, not only are we going to feel ashamed, but we're actually going to lose their esteem. This happens when you tie your self-worth, your personal identity, up in your sport. And look, I get it. I made this mistake so many times, and it cost me dearly because after a bad game, after a perceived failure, I felt like everybody was looking at me differently. I felt like people weren't looking at me as the same person because of my failure. And when we see ourselves like that, when we have our identities wrapped up in our sports and wrapped up in our success within our sports, then failure means we're losing other people's esteem and we're losing our identity. So of course we begin to fear such failure. And number 4, failures can often negatively impact your future plans. So let's say you have a goal, you're in high school, and you have a goal to play in college. To you, every single failure means you're one step further from reaching that goal. Now, that may or may not be true. There are many things that go into you getting recruited to go play in college. However, in that moment, in your mind, you believe that any failure means you may not reach your goal. Therefore, you begin to fear failure because failure means you don't get to reach your goals. And lastly, number 5, not only do we think that we're going to lose somebody else's esteem, but in fact, we believe that failure may cause somebody else stress. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought that if I fail, my parents are going to feel stressed out? If I fail, my coaches or my teammates are going to feel stress? This means we are allowing other people's emotional responses to impact our focus during a game because our focus now, instead of being in the moment, instead of being centered on what we need it to be centered on, it has now drifted onto the emotions of other people, and we feel that their response to our game is our responsibility, which it's not. That's also a discussion for a whole nother video. But when you have this idea that somebody is going to feel stressed out, this happens a lot with parents. We begin to fear failure because not only is it our emotions that are at stake, but it's the emotions of somebody we care about. And as much as their emotions and their feelings are not necessarily our responsibilities, and they're really the last thing we need to be thinking about during a game, when it's somebody you care about, it's not as easy as to just say, I'm not worried about it. It does impact you. And the way it impacts you is it makes you fearful of failing. You're scared to fail because you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to cause them stress. So those are the reasons we fear failure. Now let's move on to what you can do. What you can start doing today to eliminate the fear of failure from your life. We're always going to have the possibilities of failure, especially if you're an athlete with high goals. If you have this drive and this ambition to keep elevating the levels within your sport, within your career, then I promise you're going to fail. You're going to fail many times. But can't become fearful of that failure because that failure is necessary to a degree. It is necessary for you to improve yourself. It's necessary for you to build resilience, build mental toughness. And it's necessary because it highlights the weak points of your game. It highlights the areas that may need a little bit more work. But you're never going to know that if you're constantly tiptoeing around your sport because you are afraid to fail. Therefore, you need to begin building your mind to become impenetrable to the fear of failure. Now, I say that, but of course fear is going to come into your mind. It's inevitable. We all have fear. But with these steps I'm going to show you, you can take that fear and you can say, okay, I'm fearful. Now what? I have a process in place that helps me reduce this fear so I can recenter my focus onto what is going to actually help me succeed. So step number 1 that you need to take to work to overcome the fear of failure is acceptance. You need to accept that you are afraid. I know that may sound strange. You may be thinking, why do I need to accept my fear? I want to eliminate my fear, so shouldn't I try to fight it? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to fight our fears. We're supposed to fight our anxiety. Well, I want you to take a step back and just think about this from a psychological perspective. If you are trying to fight something, your mind is still focused on that. You're centered on this idea of fighting, of getting something out of your brain. However, our attention is where our energy is going to flow. If you don't want to be fearful of failure, why would you choose willingly to focus on failure? That's exactly what you're doing when you're trying to fight it. So to counteract this, we practice acceptance. What I want you to do right now, either in the comments below, on your phone, on a piece of paper, I want you to simply write, I accept that right now I am afraid to fail. I know it sounds silly. I know it even feels sillier, but this is an incredibly important step in you working to overcome the fear of failure. And I encourage you to even pause the video right now and reflect on that statement. Reflect on the idea that, yes, I accept my fear. I have fear. I am afraid to fail. But what happens is when you begin to accept that, you feel this shift takes place within you where you kind of step over this barrier, you step over this line, and you enter new territory where you're like, okay, I've accepted it. Now what? Now what can I do? And that takes us to the next step, which is to locate the cause. And there's one very simple question that I can ask you that if you answer will help you identify the cause. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of happening? Think back to the 5 reasons I said earlier as to why you fear failing. Which one of those really resonates with you? Which one of those really explains what you're so afraid of? To be honest with you, when I was in college and I was really struggling with the fear of failure, one of the things that really was always on my mind and I was always afraid of was upsetting my mom, upsetting my parents, and upsetting my coaches. I really struggled with, you could call it social approval, because I wanted other people to approve of me, but I really didn't want to fail because I knew that if I failed, I would feel ashamed from them. And I would feel ashamed because I had my identity, like I said earlier, really wrapped up in my sport. And what I just said really was kind of a few of those. It was the feeling of shame. It was stress and worry about how somebody is going to react to our failure. And then also, it's believing that we're losing the esteem of others. So it's not going to be black and white where you say, this one's me, this one's me, this one's me. It might be a mix of them. I gave you those 5 reasons because it helps you begin thinking about why you fear failing. So either in the comments below, in your phone, on a piece of paper again, I want you to answer that question. What are you afraid of? Why are you so afraid to fail? So take a moment, pause the video if you want to, answer that question, because that's going to really help as we move on to the next step. So the next step is a few steps in one, really, because this is where we are going to implement mental training tools to help you overcome the fear of failure. My whole philosophy is proactively building our minds, because we understand that this is how I'm feeling right now, and it's how I've felt in the past, and it's based on thinking. It's not necessarily based on past thinking. It could be based on future thinking, like the fear of failure, but that is also based in memories of what's happened when we failed in the past. But for me, it's you answer that question of why you fear failing. You located the cause. So now it's saying, okay, I understand this. Now I've accepted it, like we said with step 1, but it's time to move forward, and it's time to say, yeah, I have this fear of failure, but I'm going to take steps moving forward. I'm going to improve my mindset. I'm going to build my mind to become stronger in the face of fear. And the first technique I want to talk to you about is self-talk. The way you speak to yourself before a game, during a game, and after a game is really going to have a very large impact on the fear of failure. So pay attention to what you're saying to yourself before the game, and really pay attention to what you're saying to yourself during a game. What are you saying in terms of the outcome? Are you saying, oh, I hope I don't fail, I hope I don't fail, I hope I don't fail? Or are you saying, I want the ball, I want to make this play, I know I can make this play. I believe in myself. I trust in my skills. You see the difference? When you're wanting to work through the fear of failure, and we're talking about self-talk, a very simple practice you can take up is first identify your negative beliefs. So identify what you're saying to yourself negatively. This may take a few days. I encourage you to keep a journal of your thoughts, because that's going to help you come face to face with your current thought patterns. And then from there, you generate positive alternatives that are going to drive the way that you want to feel. And then just simply repeat them to yourself once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. The more you do it, the faster it's going to reprogram your mind. Another tool you can use is visualization. A powerful way to overcome the fear of failure is seeing yourself succeed. Yet, when you have the fear of failure, this can often mean it's difficult to actually succeed in a game. So we can take the pressure of a real game away, and we can have a safe space where you can train in your mind. You can see yourself succeed within your mind. Mental imagery, mental rehearsal, visualization, they're all the same name that just describes this practice where you close your eyes, you bring a scene into your mind, you bring the emotion from that scene into yourself, and you vividly in detail see yourself succeed. Your visualization practice, when you're wanting to overcome the fear of failure, needs to be geared towards an emotion of success. You need to see yourself succeed. You need to feel yourself succeed, more importantly. Pick out maybe the moment during your game where you're feeling the most fear of failure. For example, when I was playing, I would visualize myself hitting. I had a lot of fear of failure around hitting, yet when I would visualize, I could see myself hitting. I could see myself running the bases, standing on second base after I've hit a double, and really feeling proud and successful. For yourself, think about when you're feeling the most fear, and then visualize that and go into great detail. The third technique I want to talk to you about is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a fantastic tool at training yourself to be in the moment. Do you remember at the beginning of the video when I said that to counteract the fear of failure, we need to focus on the present moment? Within your game, you need to focus on the task at hand, the moment that's right in front of you. That's a lot easier said than done, trust me. But with mindfulness, you can train yourself to center your attention in this present moment. Mindfulness can be trained a few different ways. You can do a mindfulness meditation practice where you sit down for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you close your eyes, and you simply begin to breathe in and out in a rhythmic manner and focus on your breath. Now, with any of the techniques I'm about to talk about, this is really where the mindfulness practice comes into play. You are going to notice your mind become focused on another thought. Your head and your mind, they're going to drift. But the actual training of mindfulness happens when you notice your mind becoming attached to another thought, you see it, and you gently return your focus onto your breath. And you do that over and over again, over and over again. The more you do that, the less frequent those intervals become, and the longer you're able to hold your attention. Some other techniques include mindful walks, where you do the same practice, but you're just walking and you're focusing on your breath. Mindful jogs, and you can also just do mindful tasks around the house. So let's say you're washing the dishes. It's your night to wash the dishes, and you decide that you're going to really just make this a meaningful practice. Instead of just washing the dishes and hating it, you're going to focus your attention on your breath. You're going to be in the present moment, focused, fully and immersed in that act of washing the dishes. You do that, and before you know it, something that you normally hate has turned into a training experience for you. But those are just different ways you can train mindfulness. So when you want to move forward and you want to overcome your fear of failure, begin taking up a self-talk practice, a self-talk routine, a visualization practice, and a mindfulness practice. If you do those on a daily basis, I guarantee over time, this fear of failure of yours, it's definitely going to be reduced. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment below if you have any questions about the fear of failure, and also make sure you did those activities I told you about. Pause the video, go back, and really answer them, because working through this stuff it's not a one-time thing. It's going to take time, and it's a process, it's a practice. But with consistent effort, I know you can overcome the fear of failure. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.